To those who are trickling in, welcome to this evening's recording of Zero Hour Online. For those of you who have been on the first 5 episodes, thanks for sticking by and being regular. For those coming in for the first time, welcome, and you'll see how fun this 60 minutes is going to be. It's unlike most webinars you attend. This is not a webinar, it's an unwebinar, which is why we created this a few weeks ago. I want to especially thank Pooja Nair, who's my classmate who's joined. It's her birthday today, but she said she'll keep her commitment to being with us 6 p.m. onwards for an hour. So happy birthday, Pooja. We won't tell anybody your age. For the others who have come, I want to especially wish this lovely couple who are our guests this evening, Eka and Siddharth Banerjee. They complete 19 years of being married today. It was not the reason we chose this date, but this date, Siddharth mentioned this, and we said, wow, what a cool thing to do. So congrats, Siddharth and Eka, for being married for 19 years and knowing each other for longer from your FMS days.
Thank you, Amit.
There were 50 plus people who signed up for this, and many others will see the recording in the days to come. But usually a few people sign up and then don't turn up at the event. We already see one question that has come from Sudha Madira, which is so cool. She'll get a copy of this book couriered to her in a couple of days. This is the labor of love of Eka and Siddharth, which we'll talk about in the next few minutes as well. So those who have joined in, welcome, thanks. Zero Hour Online is a concept we created a few weeks back, specifically to help people unwind from regular, tiring, boring, sometimes serious webinars. And we said we'll bring 2 people each time, not necessarily married couples. We have this married couple here, which is the first time we're doing that. The idea was to get people as diverse from different fields, people who we make sure have diversity of a man and a woman each time. And maybe in the future we'll also get a transgender, just to make sure we cover all these sexes in some form or the other. And this is the Pride Month, the DNI month in many ways. So thanks. Quick intro to the couple we have with us this evening, Siddharth Banerjee and Eka Chaturvedi Banerjee. I've known Siddharth for a little over 15 years now. He was one of my first clients when I began my career in public relations back in 2004 and 5. He was the man who taught me to understand the nuances of FMCG marketing, retail marketing. He guided me to learn going to the retail shop floor and see how brands were marketed, how brands do various things. And I, till this day, thank him for doing that. And through that, at one event we organized together called the Tea Trays, the Taj Tea Trays back in 2006 or 7. I met Eka for the first time and then we never kept in touch. But I again met her late last year at an event in Gurgaon and we've been in touch ever since. Siddharth has written 2 books of his own prior to the current book, one on his own many years ago called High on Life, and one with Roshan Abbas a couple of years ago called Speechless. But this book, about which we'll spend a few minutes talking, is called 52 Red Pills. That's the Gurgaon sun glare you see through my window on this book. I recommend everybody on this unwebinar to make sure you get a copy of your book. The first copy we're giving away this evening is to Sudha Madira. Thanks, ma'am, for asking that question. So I'll straight away welcome Siddharth and Eka once again. Thanks for coming on board this evening.
Thank you, Amit.
Thank you so much.
So wonderful to be here on this date.
Yeah, we'll jump straight into your book first and get going from there. So this book, which came out in February, and I was lucky to be part of your Gurgaon, Delhi launch in early February, is actually very timely for the times we are in right now. It's a book that says a new age playbook to become healthy, wealthy, and wise. And I think the last 3 months have taught a lot of us that being healthy, wealthy, and wise has actually stood by a lot of people who have otherwise had a challenging 12, 15 weeks and many more weeks ahead. So tell us in a nutshell about what went behind creating this book as a couple together.
In a nutshell, it was essentially the fact that Eka and I are quintessentially a learning couple. We constantly keep learning about various facets of life. And 2 years ago, as we hit 40 years, we turned 40, we said that there must be, for all the knowledge that we have acquired, for all the ancient wisdom that Eka digs into, and she is an expert in Indian philosophy, Indian mythology, there's a lot there. And there's a lot that we love to read, experiment, try out, etc. So we said that there must be a sustainable way of living so that while we've turned 40, the next 40 years can be productive, happy, satisfying, healthy. And that's what really that journey was. The 52 Red Pills was a couple project that we started out in 2018. And then as we put it on social media, our friends and our family, they picked it up and it became a little bit of a movement, community movement, if you may. And that's when the press caught on. And in 2019, it got turned into a book, which is what you helped us with and spread the good word at the beginning of the year. So it's a couple hyper-learning project, which is now 52 Red Pills, the book.
Great. Eka, before you add your point, I'm going to ask you a question which Eka can maybe jump into. The first question of this evening from Sudha Madira. She says, I'm collaborating on a graphic poster book with a professional artist that I've written on the Beatles, and I'm struggling to find a publisher with international presence. How does one go about finding a publisher? What goes into finding the right publisher? So, okay, Siddharth can take that and then I'll come back to Eka.
Yeah, the reason why Siddharth is taking that is because Sudhaji, Rahul Velde and Sonia Madera are good friends of ours, and we are already in touch. And if you speak to Rahul and Sonia, there are a couple of connects that we've already provided, which will help address the exact question that you have. It's a super small world that you chose to ask this question, but we happen to be connected to Sonia and Rahul.
Yeah, so I should tell Sudha. Sudha is Sonia Madira's mother, for those who don't know. Sonia Madira is one of India's very cool PR professionals who moved many years back to Singapore and now lives in London. Her husband is Rahul Velde, who's a global leader in digital transformation for Unilever, where Siddharth worked a few years ago for many years. So I think the answer will come in some form. But Siddharth, for others watching, what's the tip to find the publisher? What goes into finding the right publisher for your book when you write one, since you've done 3 now?
You want to tell them the secret of the 3.5 also?
No, I think like we were kind of discussing, and you're right, we've kind of written a couple of books, and therefore there are a couple of things that might be useful for everyone around this webinar. The first is that you must have something to contribute to the world, which the world will find useful. Oftentimes, there are authors who want self-expression, and that's great. But if you want self-expression, and if we are not able to articulate what value will it be to the world, then my advice would be, and it might sound a little brutal, my advice would be self-publish if it's only about self-expression. If it is about something that is of potential value to the world, then I think there is a case to be made where you can tap into your networks, you can tap into people who've got published, and spend time talking to people who actually are either published authors or who can help you in the network of editors and so on and so forth of the fraternity. So there is a certain value to be in that space and getting referrals, warm referrals, because the classic thing is that you have a manuscript, you put it into a courier and you send it to a publisher, and then you wait and you wait and you wait, either hoping for an acceptance or a rejection slip. Our advice is to actually do your homework, get connected with published authors, get connected with people who are in the publishing industry, and have that one pager or that unique proposal ready for you, which might be about value to the world. And finally, this is coming out of Eka and my experience, even for 52 Red Pills. People are always ready to help. People are always ready to help if you have something of value to offer to the world where it is beyond yourself. So, in our own journey of 52 Red Pills, we found so many people who were very happy to contribute their knowledge, their perspectives, their sources. People gave us their books so that we could write our journey a little better. There are people who have connected Eka with sadhus and monks who we did not have the network when we had started out with. We requested Amit to be our host at the Delhi Gurgaon event. Amit helped. So people help other people if the cause is worthy. So those would be 3 things that at least we would say from our experience.
Right. Thanks. Eka, over to you.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add to that, and Siddharth gave you a very sanitized version, by the way, of how the book happened. Actually, there's a long journey. You just see the book in 2019. But for 19 years that we've been married before that, and for our journey together, I can tell you that this journey of learning and hyper learning is something that we've lived with forever. And so it's like Siddharth, and Amit, you know this, you worked with Siddharth long enough. Siddharth thinks in organizations, in grids, in tables, in to-do lists. We have post-its all over the household, including closets and cupboards. That's how he thinks. Right now, I, of course, think in absolute chaos. Everything is one journey. We'll see where it goes. If we want to learn, we'll learn. So clearly, when two people like that are living under the same roof, for years now, Siddharth has wanted to organize our life, and he does a very good job of it, by the way. So we used to run, I mean, and what we do best together is learn. That is true. What we got married to each other for is also because learning. I fell in love with him lots and lots of years ago because he'd written an article on Ayn Rand. And I said, man, anybody who thinks Ayn Rand is a philosophy is the man I want to marry. So we got married because our primary love is for learning. Now, with that, the need for Siddharth to organize our learning has been equally huge. So till about a couple of years ago, we used to actually run something called the 4x4x4 in the Banerjee household. So each member of the Banerjee family, including our two daughters, used to learn one language, one skill, one sport, and one musical instrument through the year. So at any given point of time through the house, there was Sanskrit, German, French, ukulele, guitar, drums, squash, swimming, too many things happening. Within 3 months, there was only one person who was pursuing his 4x4, which was Siddharth. So Siddharth decided, okay, not effective. He has to do a better job at this. And then interestingly, when I started my journey with ancient wisdom about 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago, first there was just curiosity. There was this very indulgent curiosity. Acha, she's finding her happiness. Then it became disturbance because I would wake him up at 3:30 at night. Suno, if you sleep at 10, your liver will heal. Suno, if you eat haldi, your throat will be fine. To which he, very indulgent he was about it. And then he said, madam, there is a lamp, write it down in a notepad there. We will discuss over chai in the morning. But then he got curious enough to then organize it into a learning. So December 2017 at Kanha over New Year's, he said, look, let's organize this. And that's when the process itself was about drawing out a long list of 63 topics that we wanted to know more about, mapping experts around it, my research, him doing contemporary knowledge, and then putting it together. So when you actually get it published, what the published book is just the outcome you're holding in your hands. So from what Siddharth is saying about finding a publisher, I would actually add 2 steps more to it, which is really find something you're so curious about and you really want to know more about. One, so it needs to consume you. And the second is, like Siddharth said, but I'll put it in different words, which is about what is your gift to the world. So not value to your people, but what is the gift that you want to give? Like Siddharth said, self-expression is fine, then self-publish. So what is your gift to the world?
I'm going to hold you onto that thought here. There's a question from Vivan Mehra, which I think makes very much sense to bring it here. His question is, if a couple has different tastes and hobbies, how can they plan and share activities together? Let me hear it from both of you. If a couple has different tastes and hobbies, how do they things together?
Yeah, I think it's super possible that couples might have different tastes, different hobbies, different interests. And indeed, I mean, even for us, we do, right? So Eka's classically India, the East, if you may. I'm classically more the West and contemporary and all of that. So I haven't yet been, I haven't yet actualized myself to the level of knowledge that Eka has. Even the way in which we learn is very different. Like Eka said, she's more the flowing river. I am more the, the formatted, templated, etc. But I think, Vivan, to your question, there must be some common ground. There must be some rules of play. So one is, of course, that you find your own space, which is also great. But we have figured out, even in the 52 Red Pills journey, that there was some rule, some broad mota rule that we could put into play to have a common journey. So the 52 Red Pills piece, Eka would do her own research. I would do my own research. We would meet experts. She would quiz them from some angle. I would quiz them from some angle. All of that was, coming at it from very different directions. But I think the step 3, which was part of our learning every week for those 52 weeks of 2018, the step 3 was about a little bit of debate and discussion, vaad vivad, a little bit of interplay. And perhaps that is what allowed us to learn together. and to build something which was a little bit more than, 1+1, or classical synergy as it's called.
See, that's again a very well organized, thought through answer. Let me get you the thoughts behind it answer, which is actually, I think the philosophy behind it is play to your own strengths. Very often in our couple dynamic, especially couple dynamics, because you spend so much of life and time together, you raise a family together. There are too many. These are your most intimate relationships. Very often there is a need to, we're so busy expressing that we don't hear or allow for space for the other person. So I think what allowed us to play is play to your own strength. It's very important that you bring yourself, and what of yourself are you contributing. That usually allows in a lot of our, and I'm not just saying book as a project, but anything together that we do as a project, like parenting as a project, right? For couples, or approaching, if you have to do up a house as a project, decide who's doing what. So for instance, one of our most common debates is that I want a house in the mountains, which is made of stone and wood. And Siddharth wants a house on the beach, and he's willing to compromise on the beach, but he's not willing to compromise on steel and glass. Right? So we've agreed that the children will design the house for us, and Siddharth can have some space on the outside with steel and glass, while I will have my space with the wood and the stone. And it's important that both of us get that space, right? So allow space for your own expression is very, very important.
Interesting. Since you said beach, I come from a town in Karnataka which is full of beaches, Mangalore. And every week I have a dedicated team of 8, 9 friends of mine who I'm a fan of actually. People of varying ages in the 60s, 70s who join this call. And there's a professor who, if you look at her, she looks like she's 40, but she retired 4 months ago. She was the HOD of English in a 100-year-old women's college in Mangalore. Her name is Malini Hebbar. She's asking a question to both of you. Her question is, wouldn't the common ground essentially be the value system? Wouldn't the common ground essentially be the value system? So maybe throw some light on that. It will help get a new perspective too.
It would be, at the heart of any successful relationship, any successful partnership, even if it's not a husband and wife partnership, at the heart of that would be shared values. I mean, I work in a startup and there are 2 founders. And while they are 2 very different people, the essential core value system, or the essential set of non-negotiables, or the essential set of driving forces are pretty much the same. So I agree to that extent that the core value system is the binding factor. But I think we must look at a little bit of, even with the same value system, there could be friction because learning styles could be different. It just could be that somebody is a morning person and somebody is a night person, right? Somebody is a little bit of a more churn within person. That's my wife. There is somebody who's a little bit, write it down, step 1, step 2, step 3, flowchart, algorithm. That's me. So some of these differences are there while the core value system is the same. So how do you really then operate, which is where friction occurs? And I think we've been able to figure out, exactly like Eka said, having the respect to play to your strengths, as well as recognize what individual piece that we are adding to the party. So Eka adds a lot of context, a lot of rich thought. But as I always argue, the book would not be fully written if it was only rich thought, because ultimately you need to get it done, which is execution. So I think that perhaps would be our recipe. Our personal recipe.
I would actually go one step further to say, and like Siddharth said, that common value systems are actually the base for any project, right? Like I said, writing a book is not very different from the way we are parents. So whether it's a parenting philosophy or it's a house creation philosophy. So the fact that 2 people are coming together for a cause necessarily needs to have the same value systems is one word, but also the same set of binding beliefs, same set of purpose. Let me put it like that. Why are you coming together at all? Like I said, for us as a couple, our output needs to be learning related, because that's what we're about. We're about learning. But for another couple, the output could be kitchen related, cooking related, it could be dancing related, it could be travel related. So know what is it that gets you together in the first place.
Interesting. So thanks both for those comments. For those who came in later, we did not start by telling you what Sid and Eka do. That's because they're not here in their official capacities. They're here more as in their personal capacities as authors of this book. But just so that you know, Siddharth has been a marketer for over 20 years now, more than that. And Eka has also been in some way part of management. So Eka is the CEO of the Future Learning Systems, if that's the right way to say it, or Eka, correct me.
Soft Skills Limited, yes, Future Learning.
So she's part of the Future Group in the leadership there, CEO of their skills and learning division. Siddharth has been a marketer. He spent many years with HUL in many geographies in India and overseas as well, Singapore, Sri Lanka. Then he came back to head marketing for Vodafone in India, then moved to the marketing sales leadership team at Facebook, and now is CMO, Chief Marketing Officer at Games 24/7, a startup in the gaming space. So that's a quick intro to both of them. So now my question to the last 3 months, Eka and Sid, how did you both and your family, including your two daughters who are in teenagers now, how did y'all cope with this entire new life that you have to deal with in a house in Mumbai, where you were all used to going out and working and studying and living that life in your apartment? How did you cope with it from mid-March when the lockdown happened? So share with us that journey of how you managed to make things work in limited space and not having the freedom to go out, and the four of you dealing with it. Tell us about that.
Oh, I could get used to this life, as I've discovered. So we've been doing some fabulous stuff at home over the last 3 months, 4 months. My only the only regret I have is that I wish I wasn't in Bombay, but I was in the mountains with some more open space. But really, Amit, for us, it's been a time of great productivity, time of great togetherness. We've come together very well. So in fact, I've by now done 2 series which build up on that ancient wisdom aspect. The first one was about building your physical immunity. So they're called the simple immunity practices, SIPs, ACOM SIPs, which are about building physical immunity. Just last week, I finished the second series of 2 weeks called ESIPs, which is building emotional resilience and strength. We've been working together at creating a whole new concept of ACOM as well. Siddharth would like to share his victory for today as well that he's found out around this. And it's unbelievable how everyone in the family has come together to learn, right? So the older daughter, by the way, the other one is class 12, was supposed to go to UK this September, got her admissions there. And then suddenly realized that there's no graduation, there's no exams. So obviously there was a whole sense of deep disappointment, especially, which comes with that sense of invincibility when you're 18. But she's been busy. She's been doing a course on philosophy, on physics, on the science of philosophy, science of happiness. She's doing some coding courses. She's, by the way, currently a full-time employee helping mother build out the whole ACOM platform as well. So I'm just saying how we're coming together. My help in the house, she's saying, she's never experienced all of us this well. She's discovering that we are nice people. She said, oh, you can cook. She's telling me. She said, I didn't know for 5 years I've been with you. I didn't know you were involved in the kitchen. And I didn't know that sir was such a pleasant person to be around with. So I think we're really enjoying this time. I think it's very precious. To me, this is everything that we ever cribbed and complained about, Amit. For all of us who said that, I don't have time, I have to travel, there's work, I can't invest in myself. This is the time that you completely run out of excuses. And to me, it's such a glorious period of visiting yourself, rebuilding yourself inside out, and truly coming together in absolute resonance.
Nice. Siddharth, I want to ask
you closely.
So you both were classmates in your MBA days in FMS Delhi, but I'm sure you both had different childhoods. Tell us something about your growing up years, days, both of you separately, and the city you grew up in. What was life like that in a nutshell? Siddharth, back to you, taking you down memory 35, 40 years. Super
different childhoods. I went to one school, Eka went to about, I think, 14 schools. No, so I think I had a childhood, typical middle class family with great emphasis on education. I think my parents invested in a school that gave me the best possible education that we could get in Lucknow, which is La Matnia. And I think I'm truly grateful for that foundation, where I was able to learn. And when I say learn across all dimensions. So whether it was academics or it was, debate or other co-curriculars, including the love for the language and writing. So I think that was my childhood. I think pretty much very stable, very focused on learning, very focused on all-round excellence, um, very, very stable set of friends, and a city and a community that I can go back to anytime. That's kind of what I remember from my childhood. Parents who kind of pretty much stayed in one city in Lucknow all their lives. That's where their kind of lives are concentrated. And that's what I'm deeply grateful for to my parents.
No, I had a very, very adventurous childhood. My father was in the army and he was in the Gurkhas. So we were almost always posted in the mountains. So whether we lived in the valley a lot, we lived in Dehradun and Uttarakhand and Harsil. I was 6 years old when I trekked to Gomukh, which is the source of the river Ganga. When I was 6 years old, we didn't even have bus connections to Gangotri at that point of time. We lived in Sikkim, we went to Bhutan, we did some really, we got stuck in the floods in Nepal. So I've had a very adventurous childhood, very close to nature. There's a sense of constant change, adaptation, evolution. Like Siddharth said, I've done my K-12 schooling across 14 schools across the country. So there's just a constant
almost every year, or literally from kindergarten.
And I wasn't thrown out of schools. Very respectable academics. I think the academic aspect also became so respectable because when you arrived in a new school, the only way you could establish yourself in our times was with kick-ass academics, right? So there was that constant drive for excellence. So while there was some army life and the adventure and the whole gypsiness about it, and therefore deep love for nature, deep love for nature, great sense of patriotism because you didn't hear from your father for months because you don't know whether your father was alive or not. So there was that sense of fortitude, discipline that came in with the father being in the army, and my mother was a journalist. So there was always that quest for truth was held in very high standards at home. So you could do anything, but you couldn't lie. And therefore, we actually had situations where my sister and I would go to my mother and tell her, okay, we broke the ketchup bottle in the afternoon because we were fighting with each other and throwing it at each other. But we are sorry. So you admitted that, despite the fact that you replaced the ketchup bottle. So you could say that you were beating up your sister and, she's bleeding because you broke a bottle on her head, but you couldn't lie about it.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so therefore I think, in fact, Siddharth and I, in fact, therefore often have this conversation where, and I think that's part of my very motherhood thinking of saying that, we've neither been able to give our kids the sense of stability, solidity, security that Siddharth grew up with. Same house, same school, same set of friends, the comfort of roots and being able to go back to them. Nor have we been able to give them the wild adventure of my life. Right? And I often miss that, to say that I wish we weren't giving this, urban corporate life upbringing, but maybe either a wilder dose or a more stable dose, because we moved around a lot. So
no, that's okay. They're also global citizens. So our kids have grown up studying across Singapore, India, Sri Lanka. So I think they're global citizens. And as the world becomes a global village, I hope some of those experiences will be useful to them.
Some values.
And some values.
Yeah, so you both grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I've seen now your teenage daughters growing up in the 2010s and onwards. What do you see is the big difference between the time? I mean, I'm closer to your age. I'm 40. From the time we grew up and now, when you see it with your daughters, they are friends. What's the big difference you see, both good and bad? And how do you see that coming together as a balance between that generation of which you and I belong to and the current generation?
I think the first thing Eka already alluded to, we were typically, both Eka and I were typically small town kids, huge fire in the belly, huge hunger to prove ourselves, to do well. And again, both Eka and I, when we say do well, it's not enough to just do, great academics. You had to do well. You had to be a kick-ass debater, somebody who reads a lot of books, has an informed point of view in the world, and so on and so forth. So I think the one clear difference for our kids is that our kids are big city kids as opposed to the small city kids that we were. And we often wonder, and it's a debatable point, but we often wonder whether they will have the same level of drive, or will it be a different level of drive to what we had. So that's a like I said, a moot point. There is no right and no wrong answer to that. The second, which is very different for this generation, and we see it with both our teenage daughters, is the level of technology, and therefore the level of plugging in with the world. They know what's happening in Africa. They know what's happening in Europe. They know the current Black Lives movements in the US. They're super plugged in, have a point of view on the world. They know what's happening, in some of the issues concerning India, including the India-China standoff, and so on and so forth. So very plugged in, very informed, lots of technology in their lives, which again, lots of pros and cons on it. And I think that puts a great onus of responsibility onto us then to have conversations, which also can seek to inform, to educate, to shape opinions. But those are two big differences that I see, Eka.
Actually, there are two trends that I would like to add on to beyond that. Siddharth alluded to the fact that our life was simpler. Like if I arrived at a new school as well, academic excellence, and you were sorted, you'd arrived. I think with this generation, because of technology, and I'll pick on from where Siddharth left it, because of technology, information has become a commodity. I mean, when we were kids, frankly, the person who had access to the library, who was able to dig out information first, came first. If I had more information than you, then I came first. I was the winner and you weren't. Right? It was as simple as that. Today, with information having become a commodity, I think this generation is not about information as much as analysis and what they do with that information. And now, while information is easy to compare, I have more and you have less, analysis is not. That's like, it's not like you're the best apple in the pack. It's like it's apples and oranges, and you need to be the best apple of your own species or variety and the best orange. At which I think the competition, the sense of competition, the sense of being their own best, the pressure is far greater. They don't have to just beat you or me or Siddharth to the tape, to press the tape and come first, but they're competing with themselves at every point of their life, because that analysis, what they process about that information, really needs to be the best. So that's to me one big burden, or one big onus they carry. And I think linked to that is the second one, I mean, where I really think that this generation gives me hope. And this generation gives me hope from the point of view of they truly express and live their own desires. Siddharth alluded to technology. They're not slaves to technology. They know how to master technology. They're not slaves to a narrative that they have not written, like we all were, right? All of us grew up, like we said, in middle class India, and all of us were of that ki, 4 naukriyan karni hai, paisa kamana hai, financial security chahiye, etc., etc. This generation is not like that, and that gives me hope. The fact that they truly live their own narrative, they have their own voices, they understand activism versus advocacy, they understand human rights, they understand their own rights. And there's something very interesting that one of my researchers that I work with very closely brought out. She said every era of people is an expression of the questions we ask, the scriptures, the behaviors. So because the age 5,000 years ago was the age of doing, it was the Karma Yuga. Therefore, the texts that emerge were the Vedas, because the Vedas are actually just SOPs. They're just SOP manuals, detailed manuals of how do you do stuff. By the time you finished doing the rituals, intellectual curiosity began. You started questioning, you started philosophizing. Therefore, the texts that followed the Veda and the Yuga that followed was the Jnana Yuga, the age of education, and the texts that emerged were the Upanishads, which are philosophical treatises. Once that text happened, and there was a lot of this, emergence of new practices, a lot of heterogeneous movement, invasions, etc., you then evolved the more storytelling text, the text of surrender, the text of bhakti, which were your Puranas. which were stories because they were much easier to narrate, which is what we grew up with, by the way. The next yuga that's coming up is the yuga of the Nyaya. So it is the yuga which is about individual human right, justice, liberty. And to me, this generation represents the Nyaya Yuga citizen, which is questioning, which is about individual liberty and its expression, which is actually about human rights, which is about human rights, even for me as a human, not just humanity as a race. This is a generation where you speak to in terms of logic. This is a generation you speak to in the sense of justice. These are words that are used in common conversations, even without us realizing how deeply they reflect the philosophy of that generation. So to me, they give me great hope.
Oh, interesting, thanks. I think it's a build-up question to that from, again, Professor Malini Hebbar. Her question is, what percentage of outcome in terms of success versus failure would you take as beyond our control? So what percentage of outcome in terms of success, failure would you take as beyond our control?
I'll take this. So in the Bhagavad Gita, there is this brilliant concept of the Kshetra. So Kshetra and Kshetragya. Of course, the way Lord Krishna explains it is about saying Kshetra is who you are, everything that is within you. And Kshetragya is the one who's beyond you and knows and controls everything. The West places it much more simpler in terms of saying circle of control and circle of concern, right? To me, the fact is that you are only in control of what is within your kshetra, your karma. And that actually leads to the concept of the karma. To say that success or failure definition kiska hai? Right? So I come back to that basic one of the concept only of success and failure to say ki if there is okay, there's a big lawyer and that lawyer decides that his son who's 22 years old must become a lawyer because he will inherit family practice and make great money. Well done. But that ladka wants to do music. Right? And he's very happy sitting in one Goa shack and earning 18,000 rupees mahine ka. He may be a very bad musician. But he thinks his life is happy and complete if he's in Goa, can play music and earn enough that gets him food on the table. Now, obviously, the father is very upset about it because he could be earning 18 lakhs a month and there he is earning 18,000 a month. But the concept of success and failure kiska hai? A, to begin with. So whose narrative are you chasing? What is your definition of success? And what is happiness? What gives you happiness? And the third one is, therefore, what are you doing about it? Tumhara karma kya hai? So, and bringing it into your circle of concern and control. In fact, that's what we've been having the conversation at the home about, right? This whole thing about the corona pandemic and about how the world is, under panic and you'll go out and whatever. There's enough fear and insecurity and panic around it. And that's concern, circle of concern. The question is, how do I bring it under my control? So my control is about the fact that I can close my door, I can keep healthy, I can wash my hands often enough, I can do my pranayam, I can consume my hot water with pepper and turmeric, and I can just feel happy about it. कि मुझे जो करना था मैंने कर लिया. And that allows us to move from a narrative which is external, which is about circle of concern, to my narrative of control. कि मेरे हिसाब से मैं successful. So, I mean, to me, what is success and failure, and then how do you bring it back to yourself?
I actually looked at the question as it was typed, just to get a little bit of a angular sense about the question and kind of try and make it a little bit more personalized to my life experience. And I think in my life experience, building on a couple of thoughts that Eka had, the first important thing, which I think a lot of us probably don't think about deeply, is ye success or failure ka jo definition hai, wo kiska definition hai. Oftentimes it is the world, Sharma ji kya kahenge, etc., right? So I think that's the first realization, that all of us have to individually define our own success parameters. What is the definition of success, and what is the milestones towards whatever is a successful outcome. So I think that's one which is super important. The second is I think habits and discipline trumps. So within my my well-defined success parameter, if I have a good system of habits set up and I can follow that with discipline, it is 100% in my hands. It's 100% in my hands. Extreme accountability. And then the third thing that I found through trial and error in my life is, if there is anything worthwhile achieving, I've given it 3 shots. So, when I wanted a dream job out of B school, there was a certain company that I wanted to get into. I did not get into it on campus. I did not get into it the second time. I persevered and I got into it the third time. And it's played out similarly in a couple of critical decisions in my life where I've said 3 chances to bante hain. And it's pretty much 100% in my framework of control. Maybe if it did not happen after the third time, it was not meant to be, or maybe I need to kind of change track and so on and so forth. But those would be my 3 life experiences.
No, interesting. Like I've never told this to people publicly, but my definition of success is if I can get 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night and fall asleep in 70 to 80 seconds after closing off the lights and hitting the head on the pillow, I'm a success. And that's my competition with myself every day. Am I able to do that or not? And there's no other way to measure it for me. I'm going to jump into 2 favorite words of mine generally, and one of the 2 words has become more prominent in the last 3 months. The word is reinvention and the word is reputation. And I'm going to ask this to Siddharth and Eka separately. So reputation for Siddharth, because he's worked on building reputation for brands, reputation for himself as a business leader and an author. And Eka's entire talk is around spirituality and philosophy without sounding so spiritual and philosophical as well. So my question is first to Eka, what have you done in the last 3 months to really reinvent yourself? And what should someone do or keep in mind to reinvent himself or herself in these times? People are losing jobs, people are having salary cuts. How do they reinvent themselves to be able to cope with the current scenario? That's my question to your reinvention. I'll come back to Siddharth on reputation after I hear this answer out.
So there are 3 things, Amit, that I have done over the last 3 months. All of them are basically linked to getting rid of excuses. So the first thing that I did is that I went back to practicing yoga on a more disciplined, everyday manner. The second thing that, and by the way, the benefits are huge because I've obviously been talking to the world about it forever and not being disciplined. See, discipline is Siddharth's thing to do. Okay, it takes me time to get there with discipline and persistence. So, so that's been the one reinvention. The second is I have really thought through this whole corporate experience and the fact that, like you rightly mentioned, being the head of a corporate house, etc., and really brought myself back to saying, what is my purpose? So we've had a lot of conversations about expressing my purpose, about how do I put it out there, about the fact that, and now I'm actively working towards just 2 purposes that I drive insanely. The first one is about transforming rural India and setting up a whole series of micro enterprises, having India embrace itself. And this is a purpose I'm driving at the government level, at the ministerial level, with bureaucracy, with the development and the social development sector, pulling it together with multilateral institutions. So to me, that clarity of purpose has happened on this is I'm not saying it's my legacy that I want to create, but this is what I want transformation affected on. By the way, it's been helped hugely with this whole reverse migration thing, because for the first time in an Indian rural cluster, you have unskilled labor, city urban skilled labor, and international labor that's come back. So that's one thing that I'm driving insanely right now, one purpose. And the other one is very clearly harnessing ancient Indian ancient wisdom to solve contemporary human problems, whether it's in the space of corporate practices, whether it's about children and value education and telling our stories to them, whether it's about health and wellness, whether it's just about putting content and journeys out there. So that's the second thing that I've done. Stepped into my purpose and expressing it with absolute passion, determination, grit, and persistence. And I think the third thing that we've done, and that is, by the way, the hardest and the most personal, which is, as a rule, I have stopped using negative words. It's a tough one. I'm promising you it's a really tough one around the house. But I've decided that I'm really going to be me, because every time I shout, I feel very unhappy about myself, or get angry, I feel unhappy. And so the third reinvention, and you shall please...
I don't think you'll get angry, but you don't use negative words. Is that what you're saying? You don't get angry also in these times?
So it actually, the not using of negative words is a very conscious choice. And when you're getting angry or fear or panic, any one of these emotions, just that thinking of the negative word that you need to replace with the alternative snaps the pathology of anger or fear or panic from creeping in. So it's one of those most powerful behavior tools. Of course, I'm not 100% there, but yeah.
But that's the hack of the evening.
Nice, interesting. So Siddharth, I'm going to come back to you on this question if you have something to add. But before that, reputation. When I worked with you 15 years ago to help build brand reputation and category reputation for tea. We worked on Brook Bond Red Label Chai and did a bunch of things on Taj Mahal tea and things like that. So I'm just alluding to that for a moment. What, according to you, is reputation, and what should people do? And there are a lot of students of ours from the School of Communication and Reputation who are actually starting their careers in a few days and a couple of days from now on this webinar. For their benefit and everybody's, what should someone do to ensure that he or she maintains and strengthens a good reputation in society in these times and otherwise? So the question is on reputation, your thoughts on reputation to help people understand this concept of reputation, learning from brands.
Yeah. See, brands are like people. So as people, what are we doing during these times? As people, some part of the personal experience is that we are kind of, doing our own thing in terms of spending more time with loved ones, building our own individual immunity, and making sure that there is time for our family and, loved ones in terms of constant conversations, whether it's phone calls or video calls, etc. So there is a personal level of people. There is a certain community aspect where we are ensuring that whoever works with us, whether it is our employees, whether it is our house help, they can be provided for. And then at a larger community level, we are doing what we can through either CSR programs or whether what can we do by pitching into friends and family who are organizing similar programs for people who might not be as fortunate, right? That's what we are doing as people. Now carry the same three principles onto what organizations and brands can do. And it will exactly be the same, which is that brands need to constantly make themselves useful. Yeah. So either they make themselves useful by just being there. Sometimes, being out of stock in itself is such I would say it's a lack of value into people's lives. So make sure that your engines are running well of your organization so that the brands which add up to something in consumers' lives, they are present there in powerfully relevant manners. So that's the first thing, which is what you owe to the brand or the business that you're running. Do that job well in the first place. The second is make sure that brands and organizations are able to take care of their people, which is employees, as well as of the entire ecosystem that surrounds it. And, I've seen and heard some of my former mentors as well as, senior alumni of Unilever who are now heads of various other organizations in various other companies of how they are pitching in, not only for their own employees, for their own companies, for their own brands, but also the ecosystem that's associated with them. And that builds brand reputation. It's not just, doing it because it kind of sounds good to say, but those are things that help build brand reputation when you're not only able to provide value to the consumer who's consuming the brand, but the entire ecosystem which is involved in bringing the brand from the factory finally into consumers' hands. And then the third thing is that if you are fortunate, play a role in terms of, if you are fortunate, and that's why I said it's like step 3, after you've done the first 2 jobs, if you're fortunate, play a larger role in what you can contribute to in this rather unfortunate time that's all around us.
Right. No, interesting. Thanks. If you want to add to reinvention or if Eka wants to add to reputation, please do. Because I have 2 or 3 more questions before we wrap up. And that's going to be around your book again. I'll start with taking an audience question from Samir Baga. He says, in the West, a successful novelist is a full-time and lucrative job. Do you think authoring books can become a full-time profession in India? Also, is the bestseller concept catching up in India? So that's his question. You can refer to it in the Q&A box for more detail. But I think for those who joined in, Siddharth and Eka's book has almost reached the bestseller mark in India, and they'll throw more light on that in the next few moments as well. So please take up Samir's question on, do you think authoring books can become a full-time profession? Is the bestseller concept catching on in India?
Yeah. So yes, and Amit, to add on to the bestseller piece, the second part of the question, we are deeply gratified that we are an Amazon bestseller. We opened up pretty much number one all India on their movers and shakers list on Amazon.com, etc. So that's deeply gratifying because at the end of the day, there's a lot of hard work that we had put into the books. So when we find ourselves in the top 10 in a crossword or in a W.H. Smith, that is certainly something that makes us happy. But if I were to take that piece, aside and answer the larger question, which is about a full-time author in India, I would actually struggle to think about any author who's a full-time author in India and minting money, which is what the question suggests. That can you have a substantial fortune? Can you be the equivalent of a Bollywood film star by being the author of best-selling books? I would struggle to find a single name who's full-time doing that. I don't think.
Just two in fiction. Maybe Ashwin Sanghi and Amish are doing well there, but that's fiction.
Ashwin is a very successful business man as well.
Yeah.
And Amish is a part bureaucrat.
Amish is a part
diplomat.
That's right. That's right.
Right. Interesting. Do you want to add to that, Eka?
And no, I think the only thing I'll go back to something that we spoke of earlier, Amit. We spoke about the fact that तुम book किस चीज के बारे में लिख रहे हो,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What is your gift? Even if it's fictional, what is the gift? What is the story you're telling? And if it's a story worth telling, then it should ideally be adaptable to any other form, no? Whether it's a film, whether it's theater, whether it's play, whether you take it off on another platform, right? So to me, the book is just the outcome. It is one SKU of the product range and product line. So frankly, even if you, for instance, if you launched a textile business, would you say that can you be a full-time, just a sari producer? No, you can't, because you still need to have your social media handles. You need to be a retailer. You need to manage the designers. You need to manage the front end, etc., right? So to me, the book is just one product that you will always have. The larger thought is, what is the gift you're giving? Whether it's fictional or non-fictional, doesn't matter. And therefore express it out. So corporate Chanakya, right? Radhakrishna Pillai has done almost 27 books by now. But his success still comes from corporate workshops, from leadership courses that he runs, from talks that he does. So irrespective of this, it's about the thought, not the product. I think it would be laying too much emphasis and overextending the concept of the book to say that the book must make you successful or the author must be your full-time profession.
Right. Interesting. Thanks. We have about 5 more minutes and I have a couple of more questions before we wrap up. The last but one question is, everybody is in a shock about what the world has gone through. Some people are kind of accepting the terms of that shock. Some people are still not yet coming to terms with that shock. What are the things you think humanity at large, and you have a wide variety of experience both as professionals, as individuals, should be doing for a better tomorrow? And this entire talk show is about conversations for a better tomorrow, and so much of inspiration and light has been thrown by both of you in the last 55 minutes or so. What are the one or two things you think is lacking in this world, lacking in society, that one should go back to in terms of basics for a better tomorrow as society, as humanity at large? I'm looking forward to hearing from both of you in a nutshell about what to do for a better tomorrow.
I think while Eka is very suited to talk about that, because she's built these series of very, very simple but powerful things that you can do, and she'll talk about it. I think if I were to sum it up, I would just say that, survive today, thrive today, survive today, so that there is a better tomorrow. Because it's just so dynamic, so volatile, so, the unprecedented word that people use. So survive and thrive today, so that there is indeed a better tomorrow. But while doing surviving and thriving today, there are some certain things that you can still do.
Right.
Actually, and I think that's largely been my the story that I want to put out to the world, and the narrative and the message to the world, which is about saying, just be yourself. And in order to be yourself, and the whole the Upanishads cover it so beautifully when they say Tata Tvama Asi, that which you are, and Aham Brahmasmi, where I am the infinite divine. So, and the whole philosophy is based on saying, boss, you take care of yourself, the world will take care of itself. And therefore, there are only three things that I always urge people to do. One is do what you really, really, really want to do. So follow your own narrative. How do you find out what your own narrative is? To find out what your narrative is, watch for what are the things that make you angry, irritated, sarcastic, snarky, hurt, depressed, offended. Question them, step into them, and you'll find that you get angry about things that are within you, but they are not yours. So stay in that space of finding out who you really are and step into it. So watch all your negative emotions. That's the first thing. The second, and that allows you, by the way, like we spoke, to flip from the circle of concern to circle of control. That's the first thing you can do. The second thing that you can do is not use, actually that I'll come to at the end. The second thing that you can do, watch yourself when you use words like supposed to, must, should, ऐसा ही होता है, ऐसा ही होना चाहिए, right, wrong, good, bad, I am right, he's wrong. Because each of these is a pillar you are holding on to for support. So question that. I mean, so it's like, रात को brush क्यों करना चाहिए? You know, you scream at the kids, brush करके सो रात को. क्यों? What's the supposition behind it? What's the logic behind it? Every time you say I am right and they are wrong, and this is something we're encouraging hugely, to say step into that other aspect as well. It's what makes you a victim. And the third and the most powerful thing, which I will leave behind as the hack, is practice the no negative. It snaps the cycle of anger, fear, panic, allows you to step into yourself, and brings you in the here and the now. So Siddharth spoke about surviving and thriving, and saying these are three things you do to survive, to thrive, and to actually live your own narrative and become your own truest self.
Interesting. Thanks. So Siddharth, you want to add to that?
No, I think, like I said, survive and thrive right now. Survive and thrive. And just to plug in Eka's, pieces of knowledge, there is something that she's created called the Simple Immunity Practices. And then she's taken it one step beyond, called the Emotional SIPs.
How do people listening to this session access those SIPs? What is the way to find those? Is there a website?
There is, of course, her open Instagram page, which is on Ekam Resonance. But even if you were to Google SIPs, you would land up either at Ekam or you would land up at her Instagram pages.
Or my Facebook page.
Yeah, okay. Because people may go to SIP and go to some mutual fund SIP. So I want them to make sure they go to
Ekam Resonance.
Ekam.
EIKAM Resonance.
Interesting.
YouTube channel coming up soon, Amit. It's a valid observation.
My last two connected questions, and we'll wrap up in the next 3 or 4 minutes. Question is, in the last 3 months, either because of the situation we are in or before that itself, have you been both planning your next book? If you can talk about it and there is a book, tell us about it. If you can't talk about it, it's okay. I'll ask another question and move on from there. Is there another book in the offing?
Well, that is exactly the anniversary gift that Eka was alluding to. So there is a book on women leadership that Eka has been writing for a really long time. A couple of years ago, there was a book called Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And that kind of created a lot of conversation around the world. And Eka felt that while that was Sheryl's book, there must be a book which is about, the Indian corporate woman, given that, we come from a 5,000 years of our own goddesses and our devis and our own culture. And so therefore, an expression of our point of view. So Eka wrote this book for the last 3-4 years. It's 80% or 90%, depending upon who you believe, complete. So I kind of managed to send it to one of our publishers. And just yesterday night, at the stroke of our wedding anniversary, we got a mail back from London saying that the book, which is tentatively titled as Goddess in the Boardroom, has been green-lighted. So Amit, to your question, the next book that's coming up is from Eka, and it's called Goddess in the Boardroom, about the Indian corporate woman and her experiences.
Do you also
Superb.
about the next level of 52 reference?
I think that is something that's still coming up.
Okay. What date or month do you have this in the pipeline to launch this book in? I have to plan my guest list ready.
Eka can answer that.
All right. You'll hear about it.
She doesn't want to commit to a timeline.
Got it. That's fine. I hope it comes out before the vaccine comes out. That should be your deadline. But anyway, I think I enjoyed. I've done 6 such episodes, 5 where I was hosting and 1 we had an external host. And I've enjoyed this as much or even more than the previous ones, because I think I have learned now the art of asking these questions more than my first few episodes. And I've done this for the first time with 2 people on the same screen and a couple living in the same under the same roof. We've always had people, and I've been thrown out because of some internet issues. Today, the internet saved me from being here throughout, and I'm glad for that. I want to thank my colleagues, Roshan, Anubhuti, Amita, Gurbani. Together, the 4 of them and I, and there's an excellent team which is not on the call, I guess, Shreya Doshi and Hemant Kaule. We've put together 25 such online events in the last 100 days, so 1 every 4 days. And every alternate one is to give back. Like this 0 hour is to give back to a group of people watching live and seeing it later that they can learn from, get inspiration from. The others are more very technical and learning in nature. So I want to thank them on this public broadcast that they have been the backbone of doing this in different ways. So thanks to them. Thanks to the various people who keep coming in. There are at least a dozen who are committed every Monday evening, 6 p.m. We are taking a short break of a week or 2. We did 5 or 6 episodes. We'll take a week or 2 weeks break and do 5 or 6 again. So it's a package of 5 or 6 series. We have a bunch of interesting people lined up for the future, but next Monday we may not do one. We'll take a little break so the team gets some breathing time as well. But for those of you who are on this unwebinar, thank you so much for stopping by. It was fun talking to Sid and Eka, and fun getting your questions of different kinds. This book, I've read this book in one sitting in February, 52 Red Pills. I suggest you all ensure you go to Amazon and pick up your copy today. It's priced $350 otherwise, but I think on Amazon there are discounts available. You can buy a printed copy or a Kindle copy if you want to. I loved it. The book has a cool concept. It talks of 52 actual things that one can do, things they did over 1 year. For example, gratitude is an attitude, running as a passion, on globetrotting and various things. Pick it up, nicely written book. It's very easy to read and easy to practice some of those things and get inspired by. I see one more box Q&A. Edifying, enjoyable, says Malini Hebbar. Thanks, ma'am. Very interesting story. I should tell you about Malini Hebbar because she's been on this call and there are a few friends, Stephen and Shanti from Bangalore on this call. So Malini, I told you retired, which means I can publicly tell you her age. In Karnataka, in India, you retire at 60. But she looks younger than me. Okay. When I was 17 and I was in class 11 or 12, I went to do a journalism workshop in an institute in Mangalore. She had come for that workshop as a then young professor from the college in Mangalore. And we became sitting next to even classmates. Like somebody many years my senior became my classmate for this 1.5 month workshop we did together. And we remained friends since then. And she's been an inspiration, a mentor, guide. And now she does a lot of things for the Toastmasters Club in Mangalore. I thought I should say that. And I remember every year because her birthday is on Valentine's Day. So I make sure I wish her on Valentine's Day every year. And that's, she's saying I better not come on video. She won't come on video. So that's it. So to the others who came on this call, some of our students who are starting jobs this week, thanks Udita and Lakshita and a few others who came on this call. I'm not going to take all names, but many of you who are religiously devoted to this, Rajesh in Dubai, Pooja Nair, whose birthday is today, Patsy and Derek Lobo, Niharika, thank you so much. God bless you all and all the best for your next 29 years of married life. Sorry, next 19 years of married life on 29th of June. Sid and Eka, we'll be in touch and looking forward to more catch-ups offline, online like these.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for everyone who tuned in. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye. God bless. Thanks, Anubhuti Roshan. Bye.